Hey, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for taking a few moments, probably 12 minutes or so, to check out the content in this video. I want to talk about Nutanix's data protection technology. Built into the platform, licensable at a few different levels. Our pro level licensing gives customers access to asynchronous data replication and associated technologies. The ability to create data protection policies, recovery plans, enabling them to test their disaster recovery readiness in a non-disruptive manner. To highlight these points, what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a demonstration. But before we get into that, let's take a look at a map. On this map, I've depicted a couple of on-premise Nutanix clusters, represented by the clusters in the North Carolina area and Phoenix areas. These are our on-premise Nutanix clusters. Rounding out the demonstration, I've got a Nutanix cluster running on AWS bare metal in the Oregon region or availability zone. In this scenario, or in this architecture, what I'd like to demonstrate for you is our ability to take virtual machines running on those on-premise data centers and replicate them, spin them up, power them on, view their desktops in the Nutanix cluster running on AWS bare metal in Oregon in a non-disruptive way. To add an exclamation point onto the top of this, there are all sorts of capabilities that come to mind in this scenario outside of strictly data protection or disaster recovery. So with that as foundation, let's get into the demo. Let's do a little data protection demonstration. I am here on my Windows 10 desktop, and I've got 3 Nutanix clusters. The first cluster is in North Carolina, RTP. You see that here. It's got its own Prism Central deployment as well as Nutanix Core deployment. Second cluster is in Phoenix. Again, its own Prism Central Nutanix Core 4-node cluster. We can actually go and take a look at the virtual machines that are provisioned here in Phoenix, as well as the virtual machines that are provisioned here in RTP. And so what I want to do, and oh, by the way, in RTP, we are running ESXi. In Phoenix, we're running AHV. And my third cluster is over here. And this Nutanix cluster is running on AWS bare metal. We can go and take a look at the virtual machine, I should say, its own Prism Central, its own Nutanix Core deployment. Take a look at the complement of virtual machines in this cluster, and it's simply the Prism Central VM. There's nothing else here at the moment. It's key to deposit that in your mind. This AWS cluster is currently barren, so to speak. North Carolina, a bunch of virtual machines. Phoenix, a bunch of virtual machines. AWS, which happens to be running in the Oregon availability zone, 1 virtual machine. Now, if I go back over to the deployment in North Carolina, go to the menu, I'm going to go down to the data protection and recovery section, and you'll notice that I've done a few things. So if I take a look at protection policies, I've set up a protection policy, and that is currently set up to protect 13 VMs in the primary location, which we said is North Carolina. We have a schedule here. The recovery point objective is 1 hour, and the recovery location is that AWS cluster, as we see here. I also have a recovery plan here in North Carolina. We'll take a look at that. Primary location, North Carolina. Recovery location is that AWS cluster. And we will come back here in just a moment, maybe look at tasks. All right, nothing to see here. Same story here in Phoenix. Data protection. I've got a protection policy. You can take a look at that. Primary location is Phoenix. 3 VMs here. We have a schedule, RPO of 1 hour. Recovery location is that AWS cluster. Back out of here. And if I go over to the AWS cluster, I'm going to show you a little bit of a different view here. I'm going to go down to data protection, take a look at the protection summary. And you'll see here in a moment that I've defined a relationship here. And so the local AZ, since we are in the context of the AWS cluster, the local AZ is the AWS cluster, and you can see that we have configured recovery locations or protection policies to point to that AWS cluster for both the RTP site and the Phoenix site. And so now what we have the ability to do is test recovery policies in a non-destructive manner. And so let me show you how we do this. I'm going to go back to the menu. I'm going to go over to recovery plans, and I will see my recovery plans for both Phoenix and North Carolina, or RTP. All the pertinent details for both. 3 entities in Phoenix, 13 in RTP, so on and so forth. Testing our recovery plan, super simple. I simply put a check mark in the site that I want to test. And before I do that, remember, when I went over here in this AWS cluster, there's only the 1 VM, right? So I go back down here, go to recovery plans. We want to test our recovery plan for Phoenix, put a check mark, go to actions, say test, verify this is what we want to do, that looks good, and we will go ahead and test. This is our proof of concept platform, so we don't have any licenses for these clusters. We will execute this anyway. All right. And I'm going to do the same thing for North Carolina. Put a check mark here, test my recovery plan, looks good. And execute anyway. Now if I go over to VMs, you'll notice that the solution is beginning to create virtual machines as a result of implementing the test plan. So I've got the 3 Windows clients from Phoenix, I think it was, and those are being provisioned and subsequently powered on. And after a refresh here, you'll begin to see those VMs from North Carolina also show up here in the active list. And if I pause here for a second, you'll see these subsequently begin to power on as well. All a part of testing our recovery plan. Super simple, easy to do, and it just works. What's interesting about this recovery plan test is there's a lot of additional benefits that you get by way of doing something like this. For example, in some of the demos that I've been preparing for,
I've actually used this capability to clone VMs in a different site, and then I will place a check mark in one of these guys and then actually clone it again locally to have an instance of that virtual machine to experiment with after reverting from the recovery plan test. So pretty cool. A lot of things that, a lot of side benefits that you get as a result of this capability. And so now here I am on my AWS cluster. I've got all of my failover VMs created. They're powered on. I can take a look at the console for one of these recovery VMs. And what we should see is a Linux machine waiting for a logon. Super cool. Go back over here. Take a look at one of the Windows test VMs. Windows 10 client here. And this is probably waiting to go through a setup process. Yep. So super simple to execute these recovery plans and not very difficult to set up either. And so there you have it. That's a quick look at, actually before I do that. And so once we've confirmed that our test plan looks good, we can clean this stuff up. Equally simple. Go to our menu option, go to recovery plans. I'll put a check mark in both of these and simply clean up my test VMs. Go back over to VMs. Here we're still on the AWS cluster. And in a moment, we will notice that these VMs will disappear. And that's the end of our recovery plan test. Short and sweet, super simple. Anyone can do it, I think.
So what do you think? Pretty cool, right? Integrated data protection, licensable at various levels. AWS Pro gives customers access to asynchronous data replication technologies. A la carte licensing options on top of that gives them access to what we call near sync and synchronous replication technologies. AWS Ultimate gives you the full entitlement to the full suite of data protection technologies within the Nutanix platform. It's been a quick demonstration and illustration of data protection with Nutanix. For more information, reach out to your account team. I'm sure they'd be happy to provide you with an in-depth demonstration, boot camp, whatever you'd like to see. We think that this technology is super powerful and enables organizations to do great things in a world of ever-increasing internet-centric threats to our infrastructures. Thank you for watching.